Hello and welcome to As Built, the podcast from Graphic Machine about architecture firms, buildings, and how both get built. I'm your co-host, Patience Jones. With me is your other co-host,
Brian Jones.
Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the job that Brian and I have that's the same job, and it's the job of everybody at our firm, and it should be the job of everybody at your firm, and that is business development, which is something that people right now are probably vomiting about because they're thinking, oh no, that's not my job. I already have 15 things I'm responsible for. So what do we mean by that?
Well, let's start with what we don't mean by that. So we're not suggesting that everyone needs to be pitch deck ready, but it's really a matter of keeping your eyes open, taking coffees when appropriate, and generally knowing the position of the firm so that if you find yourself in a situation, you are helping assist in the business development for the firm.
Yeah, I would actually take like coffees and meetings even off of that list.
Okay.
Because there are people, like, it just doesn't make sense, you're not going to send like your most junior person out to have a meeting with a prospect. But everybody at the firm needs to know what the firm does, which sounds laughable, but query your staff and see if everybody knows what it is that you do,
Yep.
why you do it, who you are looking to work with. So is a client in this vertical somebody that you would do work for? Are there qualifiers around the types of prospects? Like a project has to be X number of square feet before you would consider it. Those are types of things that everybody in the firm needs to know, because you never know when somebody's sitting on the subway, out at a lunch, at a party, at a family event, something comes up, and that's the opportunity for your staff, whoever it is at your firm, whether it's senior level or junior level, to say, oh, tell me more about that. My firm does X. Or somebody says, oh, Sally, what is it that you do? And you say what the firm actually does. And somebody pipes up and says, oh, that's so interesting because, I work at such and such company and we're looking for an architecture firm to do X, Y. That's the level of business development that we're talking about.
And I think that it's important for two reasons rather. The first is it helps the growth of the firm, which is always a plus for keeping everybody employed. The second is that it acts as a stepping stone for people in their career path, because you will never be ready to do more if you don't start with this basic level of work. And the more that you become part of that process, the more you are integral to the firm, the more that you bring value to the firm. And it's just a win on every level for you as an employee, if you're on the employee side of things, and as an owner, it's something you want to cultivate, because ultimately this is how you raise up the next generation of leaders.
Exactly. And you reach so many more people. Think about the number of people that you have working in your firm, and then think about all the different circles that they run in. They're probably not all in the same friend group, family, school alum, region. So you can reach all these different people by doing this. And you can also prevent somebody saying something that isn't right. If you have a really exuberant employee who really wants to help but hasn't been trained on what it actually is that you do and what you're selling, you're going to get leads from people who are, oh, I understand that you do, water infrastructure, and I have this big project and I was told that you can help me with this. That's just as bad as, and maybe worse, as not getting anything in the door.
Definitely. And I feel like that's the risk, is that if you don't go through a proper sort of organization and training with the staff about what you're up to, you're risking the narrative being whatever they decide in the moment that it is. And this allows you an opportunity to really shape that, inform it, but also answer questions that they may have along the way that may help clarify and give them a better grasp of what's happening.
And everybody should be clear that the expectation is not that everybody in the firm will go out and start signing new clients.
No.
And that may need to be articulated, that that's not appropriate either. You have to set out for everybody, okay, this is the process. If you meet somebody, if you hear that somebody's interested, if somebody says they'd like to hire us, here's who you go to at the firm for the next step of that. And that the longer that somebody's with the firm, the more that they could handle in a new client prospect. But that people should not be, coming in and a month at the firm, right out of school and saying, oh, I got this client to agree to this project. Did you now?
Yeah. I mean, I think you touched on one of the key reasons this is important is because the scale of networks available, the more people you add to the firm, the larger the potential network of people that you could interact with and engage with that could really impact the outcome in the future of the firm in a meaningful way.
There are also probably people at your firm whose strict job role does not include business development. But let's say that person's on a panel. They're a senior, junior level or beginning senior level. They're on a panel. They're a subject matter expert. They also need to have some basic business development skills because they're going to be in that room meeting people. And it's less valuable for them to do that event if they show up at the last minute because they don't want to interact with anyone because they don't really know how and they hate being around people. They give their spiel on the stage and then they bolt. That's way less valuable than somebody who can show up early, schmooze, do the panel, stay after for Q&A. There are just so many missed opportunities if people feel like, one, they're not empowered to do this, and two, there's no expectation of them to do this.
And as a bit of an aside, and this is sort of a little bit of a tangent, but I think related, is that if you're the kind of firm leader who feels like, oh, I can just prompt AI to tell me exactly how to help my staff, you're missing the valuable opportunity to really create that connection between you and the team, and really you own that narrative and you shape that narrative. We say this so often, but it bears repeating, which is there are so many times that they're just not a shortcut, and this is one of those times. And your firm will be better for it if you go through this process and if you really invest the time to build the team to this basic level of skill that really helps the firm.
And something that, using AI to create like an SOP and just handing it to your employees and saying, okay, now do this for business development. You are cutting out the step where they give suggestions and they give feedbacks. And they may say, hey, when I'm meeting with people and I tell them what they do, this is a question that I always get and I don't know how to answer it. Or, we're not talking about this thing that we do. How should we talk about that?
Well, and in the process of having this conversation, you are in fact demonstrating what it looks like to have this conversation.
That's exactly right.
And so there's just no replacement for that. There really isn't.
No. And everybody's different too. There, if you subscribe to the introvert, extrovert, ambivert, there are people that are just more comfortable in large crowds. There are people that are more comfortable in one-on-ones or email instead. So part of this too is assessing what will this person feel most comfortable doing if BD isn't their official job title and it's not their official role. What tools and resources can we give them so that they don't feel like this is, a Herculean ask that they'll never be able to accomplish and they just ignore it and become a recluse? We want to say, okay, this person really hates large groups. Let's give them the tools so that when they're talking one-on-one with people, they have the information. And we also are educating our staff on what to listen for as potential indicators that somebody's looking for a job that we would want. And then here's what to do when you hear those potential indicators. Here's when to pipe up. Here's when to just silently listen to that information and come back and give it to somebody more senior. Those things are really, really important.
And you're shaping your own destiny as a firm the more that you engage in this practice, because you get potential buy-in for a project that somebody might want to work on before it even begins, because they are invested. And that level of investment, that helps create a bond with a firm that can really help build the team up over time. And if you're looking for ways to keep talent and retain talent, this is a great way to really add another tool to your toolkit.
It's also a way, it sounds a bit ruthless, but it's a way to be more efficient. I've worked with firms who they'll say, well, we have this existing client and it seemed like they have a new project. So we're going to have BD reach out to them, and the person working on the project says, well, that's not my job. I'm not in BD. Of course we'd send it to BD. No, not really. You have the existing relationship with a person, and how's that client going to feel when this BD person that they may have never even met before reaches out to them and says, oh, hey, I heard you're interested in doing XYZ. They're going to think this is so unnatural and weird, and why can't I talk to the other person? So ideally, if they're working with an architect and they indicate that they're looking to another project, that architect can at least have the preliminary conversation with them. What are you looking for? What is it? Not just saying that's not my job.
Yeah.
And that's really, I think, where we're coming out, because I've talked to CEOs and principals and partners and BD staff who get so frustrated because everybody else at the firm says, well, that's not my job. And, somebody called me about a project and I just forwarded it to you because that's not my job.
Well, and in a world where relationships are so critical to the success of the firm, this is increasing the territory that you can cover. So it's just that simple.
Yeah. I would hope that the following analogy is true. But if you walked into your office and you saw that the ceiling was leaking, I would really hope you would go get a bucket and put it underneath the leak. You wouldn't say, well, that's not my job. I'm not the bucket person. I'm just going to keep working in this leaky office. I sincerely hope that that's how that would go. If that's not how that would go, then just stop listening to this episode and start questioning some other things about yourself. But
so big takeaways.
Really think of BD as like an umbrella, and think of your BD team as BD specialists, not the only resource that the firm will ever have for doing any kind of business development.
And I would say the only other thing I would add to that is it is a great team building exercise because you're bringing people closer into the firm. And I think that pays you back in ways that you'll see down the road.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us. This has been As Built, and we will see you next time.